Hi, my name is Lillian Lewis. I'm 38 years old, originally from Dallas, Texas, but I've been living here in Austin for a few years now. I'm a Christian woman, married for over a decade to Henry, my best friend, my life partner, and the one who held my hand through the toughest times. I work as an administrative assistant at an insurance company. Life is busy, full of responsibilities, but I've always made time for what mattered most to me, the dream of building a family. I grew up dreaming about that. I always pictured myself getting married, building a home, and of course, having kids running around the house. But honestly, I never imagined that would become the biggest challenge of my life. Because no one prepares you for the silence of the womb, or the silence of God. It was years of tests, throwing away pregnancy tests, hearing doctors shake their heads and say, "It's not going to be as easy as you thought." And if you think this story ends in disappointment, let me tell you something, never underestimate what God can do in this secret place. Because I'm living proof that when heaven seems quiet, God is actually working on something far greater than we can imagine. Today, the same woman who was once told, "You can't be a mother," is now called mommy by two little miracles running through my house. And if you're in a season of waiting, of struggle, of pain, stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share might completely change the way you see your journey. For as long as I can remember, holding a baby in my arms was more than just a dream, it was a deep longing of my soul. I still remember, back when I was a little girl playing house, I was always the mom. And it wasn't just a coincidence, in my heart, it felt like God had planted that desire in me long before I even understood what it meant. While other girls dreamed of becoming doctors, teachers, or singers, I dreamed of becoming a mother. That desire burned inside me like a flame that never went out. Growing up with that dream was something really powerful for me. I used to imagine the smell of a baby, the sound of little giggles filling the house, the sweet chaos of a full and lively home. And it wasn't just some romantic idea, it was something that made my heart beat faster. Many times, during my devotional times as a teenager, I would pray and ask God to bless me with a family in His perfect timing. And you know what? I truly believed that it was a promise He had planted in my heart. But, if there's one thing life teaches us, it's that our dreams don't always come true as quickly as we hope, right? And honestly, I had no idea that the road to living that dream would be so challenging. But you know the kind of dream that, no matter how long it takes, you just can't let go of it? That was exactly how it was for me. Little did I know that this journey would teach me about faith, resilience, and the power of trusting God even when everything seems impossible. When I look back at my story, there's no way I can ignore how generous God was in giving me Henry, my husband. Oh, he's not just my husband, you know? He's my life partner, my best friend, and my biggest encourager. We met in a pretty unexpected way, at a church retreat. And honestly, from the very first glance, there was something different. The connection we felt wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual. It was like God was whispering to my heart, "He's part of the plans I have for you." Henry has always been a God-fearing man. Even when we were just dating, he made me feel safe, respected, and most of all, loved for who I truly am. And let me tell you, finding someone who shares your faith, who understands the importance of praying together, seeking God together, and dreaming together, that's priceless. From the very beginning, we talked about having children. We dreamed of a house full of life, the smell of something baking in the oven, and little voices running through the rooms. And it wasn't just sweet talk from a couple in love. We prayed, we planned, and we asked for God's guidance every step of the way. You know, that kind of love that doesn't hold you back, doesn't control you, but helps you grow, a love that strengthens you and draws you closer to God? That's exactly what we built together. And the truth is, when two hearts are aligned with heaven, they also align with their purpose here on earth. But as you'll see, not every dream, no matter how blessed, comes easy. After we got married, I'll be honest, we thought that positive pregnancy test would come pretty quickly. I mean, it just felt like the natural next step, right? Marriage, love, plans, and soon, kids. But the months started going by, and nothing. At first, Henry and I kind of laughed it off. Oh, it's probably just the stress from the wedding, the adjustment, the new routine, we'd say. But deep down, a small knot of anxiety started forming in my chest. Each cycle brought with it that same mix of hope and disappointment. You know, that feeling of waiting, and waiting, while time keeps slipping through your fingers like water? That's exactly how I felt. Every new month came with a maybe this is the one, followed by life's painful silence whispering, not yet. And look, I've always been a woman of faith, but in those early days, I had no idea how big the battle ahead of me really was. In the middle of it all, it became almost impossible not to notice how pregnancy seemed to be everywhere I turned. Friends getting pregnant, family members announcing babies, social media filled with gender reveals and maternity shoots, and there I was, smiling on the outside, but quietly fighting that ache on the inside. And that's when I started to realize, the path of waiting wasn't going to be as simple as I thought. And little did I know, that was only the beginning. I'll never forget that day. The doctor's office felt colder than usual, the clock seemed frozen in time, and my heart, it was beating so hard, it felt like it was going to leap out of my chest. The doctor walked in, pulled up that rolling chair, looked me in the eyes, and with that serious tone no one ever wants to hear, he said the words I never thought I'd hear, "Lillian, unfortunately, you have a condition that directly affects your fertility." In that moment, it felt like the floor dropped out from under me. The world went silent, and honestly, I didn't know if I should cry, ask why, or just pretend it wasn't happening. On the way home, Henry and I could barely speak. You know, that kind of silence that feels deafening? That's exactly what it was. I stared out the car window, watching people walking by, living their lives, and I kept asking myself, why, God? Why me? My mind was spinning, a storm of fear, sadness, disbelief, and to be honest, a deep feeling of helplessness. After all, when you grow up hearing that God is the God of the impossible, you never expect to have to face an impossible that feels so personal. And what hurt the most was knowing that the dream I had carried with me since I was a little girl now felt so far away, almost out of reach. It was like someone took a paper full of all my hopes and plans, and ripped it right in front of me. In that moment, the questions took over. Now what? What if it never happens? What if this is just how my story goes? But what I didn't know was that even when I couldn't see it, God was already writing a story far greater than anything I could imagine. If there's one thing no one really tells you, it's how loud silence can be. Not just the silence of an empty womb, but the silence deep in your soul. Every time someone would ask, often without meaning any harm, but completely unaware, "So, when are the kids coming?" it felt like they were ripping open a wound I was desperately trying to keep closed. And the worst part, it wasn't just the words. It was the curious looks, the half smiles, the offhand comments at family lunches that made me swallow my tears, take a deep breath, and say, in God's timing, even when, inside, I was falling apart. But it wasn't just about dealing with other people. It was also about facing my own thoughts. With every passing cycle, my body seemed to remind me that something wasn't right. The silence in my womb started echoing in my mind. Did God forget about me? Am I not worthy of being a mother? Did I do something wrong? And trust me, those questions hurt more than anything anyone else could ever say. It's a silent, invisible battle, one only those who've lived it truly understand. And through that process, I learned that there are wounds we may manage to hide from others, but we can't hide them from God. There were so many times when I'd smile on social media, laugh at family gatherings, but the moment I closed the bedroom door, I'd break down. And through the tears and all the questions, I slowly began to realize that sometimes God's silence doesn't mean He's absent, it means He's building something. But in that season, I'll admit, it was still really hard to believe that. Oh, if the walls of my bedroom could talk, they'd have so many stories to tell about the countless nights I knelt down, clutching a pillow tightly against my chest just to muffle the sound of my crying. It was there, in that quiet corner, that I poured out my soul before God. My prayers weren't pretty or eloquent, filled with fancy words. No, they were silent cries, broken sighs, and that simple, desperate plea, Lord, help me. I don't know what to do anymore. And if you've ever prayed through tears, tears are a kind of prayer only God truly understands. Each night I knelt, it felt like my heart swung between hope and frustration. Some days, I prayed with bold faith, declaring Bible verses, reminding God of His promises, saying, Lord, you are powerful. Nothing is impossible for you. But I'll be honest, there were also days when all I could whisper was, Father, I'm tired. And I'd just sit there, in silence, because I didn't even have the words anymore. It's amazing how closely faith and pain can walk together in certain seasons of life, isn't it? And what's even more incredible? Even in my weakest prayers, even through the quietest tears, there was a truth that never fully left me. No matter how shaken I felt, God was listening. It's that kind of conviction you don't always feel, but somehow you just know. I didn't see answers, I didn't see movement, but something deep inside me kept whispering, keep going, Lillian. God hears you. And little by little, through the tears and the prayers, I started to realize, sometimes, it's in the moments when we feel the weakest that God begins writing the most beautiful chapters of our story. After so many prayers, tears, and seasons of waiting, Henry and I decided to seek medical help. And let me tell you, I had no idea just how heavy, exhausting, and emotionally draining that road would be. We started with appointments, tests, endless rounds of lab work, and soon after, came the hormone treatments. My body became like a walking lab. Injections, medications, special diets, constant monitoring, and with every cycle, came new hope. And with every negative test, another crushing wave of disappointment. What hurt the most, though, wasn't just the physical toll, it was the invisible one, the emotional weight. Because no one really tells you that these treatments don't just affect your body, they hit your self-esteem, your thoughts, and sometimes even your marriage. There were days I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize myself. Bloated, sensitive, exhausted, with that question pounding in my mind, will it work this time? And the fear of what if it doesn't, was even harder to bear. But even with all of that, I kept going. Because when you carry a dream in your heart, you don't give up easily. I clung to God's promises, to Bible verses, to little notes of encouragement I'd write and stick by my bedside. It was almost like I had to remind myself every single day that God hadn't abandoned me. And while the world outside kept moving at its usual pace, I was walking my own quiet battle, between needles, hormones, tears, and the hope that somehow, in the middle of this desert, God could still bring life. You know, there are seasons in life when you think you've already cried all the tears you possibly could, that you've felt all the pain your heart can handle, and then you realize you haven't. That's exactly how it was for me. After so many attempts, tests, prayers, and disappointments, a deep kind of soul weariness settled in. I had always been the woman of faith, the one encouraging others, saying God can do anything, and suddenly, I found myself wondering if that still applied to me. And honestly, it's not easy to admit this, but I had reached my limit. Plain and simple. There were days I didn't even want to get out of bed. I'd stare at the ceiling and think, Lord, is it still worth believing? And let me tell you, that question hurts more than any medical diagnosis. Because when pain starts shaking your faith, the desperation hits even harder. And to be really honest, there came a moment when I simply told God, if this isn't going to happen, help me accept it. Give me peace. Because this cycle of hope and heartbreak, it's tearing me apart. It was one of the most raw, honest, and vulnerable conversations I've ever had with the Lord. But you know what? It was right there, in the place where I felt the weakest, the emptiest, the most broken, that I started to notice something I hadn't seen before. It's when we come to the end of our strength, that God begins to move in His. And even though I couldn't feel it yet, that moment marked the beginning of a turning point in my story. I just didn't know it at the time. All I could see then was silence, and one question echoing inside me, God, are you still listening? It happened on a regular night, during a simple Wednesday church service, one of those you almost talk yourself out of going to, you know? I was so tired, so emotionally drained, that I even told Henry, I just want to stay quiet tonight, but something inside me pushed me to go. And thank God I did. Because it was that night, in a setting that seemed so ordinary, that God's extraordinary reached me. When missionary Harper Miller stepped up to the altar, she didn't even have to say much. She simply looked in my direction and, with a steady voice, said, God wants you to know, I haven't forgotten your prayers. In that moment, I broke down. You know that feeling when it's like heaven tears open just to reach you? I cried like I hadn't cried in a long time. And it wasn't just tears of pain, it was a mix of relief, hope, and that breath of life God gives us when everything feels lost. The most powerful part was that she didn't know anything about my life. No one there did. Only God. And it felt like He was whispering to me, I'm here, my daughter. I hear you. I see you. I remember you. And I won't lie, that word didn't fix everything right away. I didn't walk out of there pregnant, or with a magical solution. But for the first time in a long time, I felt my spirit being strengthened in a way only someone who's been there could understand. It was as if God had reignited the flame that had almost gone out inside me. And from that moment on, I started to realize that maybe what God wanted to teach me before the miracle was something much deeper and far greater. Look, if there's one thing God had to teach me, and I'll be honest, it wasn't easy to learn, it was about His timing. Because honestly, waiting is one of the biggest tests of faith anyone can face. And it's not the kind of waiting that's light, calm, and full of certainty, no, it's the kind that squeezes your chest, tests your patience, and often makes you wonder if God is really listening. But little by little, I came to understand that waiting on the Lord doesn't mean standing still, it means trusting, even when you don't understand, and keep moving forward. It was during this process that God's Word became my daily refuge. I clung to verses like someone grabbing onto an anchor in the middle of a storm. One that gave me a lot of strength was Isaiah 55 verses 8-9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." And honestly, that made so much sense, because while I was stuck on the when, God was teaching me to focus on the how. And that how always involves inner transformation, maturity, and growth. And you know what? During that time, I began to see how much God was shaping me, teaching me to be grateful for little things, to depend more on Him than on any other resource. And slowly, I realized that God's timing isn't late. It comes at exactly the right moment, when our faith is ready to receive what He has prepared. You know that moment when you realize you've done everything you possibly can? Yeah. I reached that exact point. I had tried the treatments, prayed, fasted, cried, and given my best effort, but it seemed like nothing was changing. Then, one simple morning during my devotional time, I felt God whisper to my heart, "Let go, daughter, just let go." And this wasn't just saying it for the sake of saying it, it was a real, deep surrender, giving up control, plans, and expectations, and simply trusting. And don't think it was easy, okay? Because for someone like me who always liked to have everything organized, planned, and written down, handing over what I wanted most in life to God was, without a doubt, the biggest act of faith I've ever done. But I remember clearly. I knelt down, lifted my hands, and said, "Lord, if it's your will, I know the miracle will happen. But if it's not, teach me to be happy anyway. Teach me to live to glorify you, no matter what." And, believe me, I cried like never before. It was freeing. Something inside me broke, but at the same time, something was rebuilt. I started living with a new kind of peace, a peace that didn't depend on 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test or test results. It was a peace that came from knowing God is God, and that was enough. Interestingly, it was after this total surrender that things quietly began to move. But back then, I had no idea how much God was already working behind the scenes. It was a completely ordinary day, one of those where you wake up, make coffee, tidy the house, answer emails. Nothing seemed different. Honestly, I wasn't even feeling that anxious to take a pregnancy test anymore. After so many negatives, my heart was tired of the emotional roller coaster. But something was off, a little discomfort here, more tiredness than usual there. And you know that quiet whisper in your heart? Yeah. I clearly felt God nudging me, take the test. And even though I was a bit doubtful, I went ahead. I took the test, already with little faith, I admit. I did it, and left it on the bathroom counter, almost forgetting about it. When I came back to check, my eyes just couldn't believe what they saw. 2 lines. Yes. 2 lines. I was shaking, crying, laughing, and saying out loud, "No way, no way." It felt like time stopped. It was as if God, right at that moment, was hugging me and saying, "See, daughter? I never stopped hearing your prayers." And honestly, there are no words in the world to describe that moment. Henry came home from work, and when I showed him the test, it was this flood of tears, tight hugs, a mix of disbelief and gratitude. We knelt right there in the middle of the living room and prayed. We thanked God, we cried, and we declared, "This child is the Lord's promise." And the most amazing part is that when I least expected it, when I had already stopped chasing the dream, when my only choice was to rest in God, He came through and surprised me. And honestly, that was just the beginning of a new chapter. Oh, what a wonderful, challenging, and at the same time, miracle-filled season. When I heard "Congratulations, you're pregnant" at the doctor's office, it felt like I was living a dream while awake. But to be honest, along with the joy came fears, Because after hearing no for so long and fighting through diagnoses, you carry that little bit of insecurity. Will everything be okay? Will my body hold this blessing? And believe me, there were many nights spent talking to God about that. But even with butterflies in my stomach, I decided to live every moment of that pregnancy as if it were a rare, precious gift. Every ultrasound felt like a worship service. The first time I heard that tiny heartbeat, my God, it sounded like a song straight from heaven. Henry and I cried, prayed, and every night we placed our hands on my belly to bless our daughter, declaring verses like Psalm 139 verses 13 to 14, "For you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made." And every kick, every little movement, every bout of morning sickness, yes, I even thanked God for the sickness. Everything became a reason to celebrate. Our home turned into a place full of hope, plans, and joy. Picking the name, setting up the nursery, folding the little clothes, it all felt surreal. And each day, my heart filled more with the certainty that God not only keeps His promises, He does far more than we ask or imagine. And honestly, little did we know, the best was yet to come. Just thinking about it brings tears to my eyes. That September 18th is forever marked in my story as the day God made real a promise I had carried in my heart for so many years. When the contraction started, I confess, a mix of fear and joy took over me. And while holding Henry's hand in the delivery room, all I could do was pray quietly, saying, "Lord, hold my hand. This moment is yours, this daughter is yours." And honestly, God was there every second, holding our hands. When I heard that first cry, oh my God, it felt like the whole sky was singing along. That sound filled every emptiness, healed every wound, erased all the no's I had heard for so long. Holding my daughter, Sophia Lewis, in my arms, it's impossible to put into words. That tiny face, those little hands moving, her eyes trying to open, it was like holding a living miracle, real, breathing, pulsing love right there in my arms. And the most amazing part is that in that moment, everything made sense. Every tear, every prayer, every wait, absolutely everything was worth it. God, who seemed silent, was actually writing a story much bigger than I could ever imagine. And holding that little piece of heaven, all I could think was, if the Lord did this, who knows what else He's still capable of? And honestly, I had no idea He wasn't finished yet. You know that saying that God always does more than we ask or imagine? Well, I'm living proof of that. 2 years after Sophia was born, when we were already completely settled into life as parents, with the house full of toys, diapers, and laughter, came a surprise that still moves me just to think about. No treatments, no planning, no calendar in hand, it just happened. That delay, which for me wasn't even a reason to hope anymore, turned into the second positive pregnancy test of my life. I have to confess, when I saw those 2 lines again, I was totally shocked. I looked at the test and said, "No way. Lord, again?" And at the same time I was crying and laughing. And Henry? Oh, Henry just stood there, silent, staring at the ceiling, nervously laughing. Then, he knelt down right there on the living room floor and said, "Thank you, Lord. You are good all the time." It was beautiful, it was light, completely different from the first time. Because now there was no fear, no anxiety, just gratitude and that feeling that God really loves to surprise us. And so, 9 months later, our boy was born, Lillian Lewis. An unexpected gift, but perfectly fitting into God's plans for our family. And you know, every time I look at my 2 children, I remember, the God who opens a door doesn't just open it for you to walk through. He throws it wide open. He does more than we expect. He shows that when he decides to act, there is no diagnosis, no statistics, no impossible that can stand in his way. And honestly, my home, which once was full of silence, now overflows with life, love, and miracles in every corner. You know that home that was once quiet, full of waiting, prayers, and even tears? Well, today it's completely different. My house has become a symbol of life. Toys scattered everywhere, laughter echoing down the halls, the sweet smell of cake mixed with diapers, kids running around barefoot, noise, and mess, the kind that doesn't bother you but warms your soul. And honestly, every little detail of this holy chaos is a living reminder that God has kept his promises in my life. I'll admit, there are days when I feel exhausted. Because, you know, being a mom of 2 is no easy task. One's crying, the other's throwing a tantrum, you want to take a shower but have to run out because someone shouted "Mom" from across the house. But you know what, even in the tiredness, I find myself smiling. Because for so long, I dreamed of exactly this. I dreamed of this noise, this hustle and bustle, these little paint-covered hands, those tiny feet running through the house, and today, all of that is my reality. My home has become that place full of love, life, and purpose. And don't think it's only about the kids. Because in this process, Henry and I have grown a lot too. Our marriage has been strengthened, our faith deepened. We've learned that family isn't just made of perfect moments, but daily choices, to love, to forgive, to build, to celebrate the simple things. And you know, every time I look at Sophia and Aiden, I see more than children. I see answers. I see living testimonies that God is a master at turning tears into laughter, and silence into abundant life. Today, looking back, you know that feeling you get when you reach the top of a mountain and finally see the path you took from up there? That's exactly how I feel. Every tear, every prayer, every silence that felt like rejection, today I understand it was actually God preparing me, shaping me, teaching me things that, if the miracle had come sooner, I might never have learned. The process wasn't easy. And to be honest, many times I thought I wouldn't make it. But today, I see that it was through that process my faith grew stronger in a way nothing else could have done. God wasn't just preparing my womb. He was preparing my heart. He taught me to be more empathetic, more sensitive to others' pain, more dependent on Him and less on circumstances. Now, when someone tells me they're going through a time of waiting, my response isn't just have faith, it's a hug, it's I know exactly how you feel, it's a living testimony that God is never late, He's always perfecting the timing. And yes, He turns deserts into gardens. And you know, one thing I carry with me is that if God had given me this miracle at the very start, when I thought I was ready, I would have missed so many precious lessons. I would have experienced the miracle, yes, but without the depth, the maturity, the faith I have today. That's why I understood that, often, God delays what we want, not because He wants to punish us, but because He wants to strengthen us, prepare us, and align us with the best He has for us. And honestly, that changes everything. If today I could sit right in front of you, look into your eyes, and say something, I would say, don't give up. I know it hurts. I know there are days when your pillow is your only confidant, when you look up at the sky and ask, Lord, when will it be my turn? Because yes, I've been exactly there, in that place of waiting, uncertainty, faith mixed with tears. But let me remind you of one truth I learned firsthand: God doesn't waste any process. If He has put you on this path, it's because something much greater is being built, beyond what your eyes can see. I learned that in God's kingdom, waiting isn't wasting time. Waiting is being refined, being strengthened, being prepared to receive what God has, in the way He wants and at His perfect time. So, while the miracle hasn't come yet, take care of your faith, take care of your heart, feed yourself with the Word, surround yourself with people who lift you up, who pray for you, who remind you who the God you serve is. And hey, if today you don't have the strength to pray, just breathe and say, Lord, I still believe. Because sometimes, that alone is a powerful prayer. And if there's something I carry in my heart as a mission, it's to use my story to remind you that God doesn't forget anyone. Not you. He's not deaf to your prayers, He doesn't ignore your tears, and He will never abandon you in the middle of this journey. The same God who turned my crying into dancing, my silence into laughter, and my waiting into a testimony, is the same God who sees you, loves you, and is already preparing something that will exceed everything you asked for, dreamed of, or imagined. And honestly, you have no idea what He's still going to do. And now that you know my whole story, let me ask you, looking right into your eyes, as honestly as I can, how long will you let fear make you believe that God has forgotten you? How long will you accept the lies that say your miracle won't come, that it's not for you? Because, look, if God did it in my life, and in a way I never imagined, who told you He can't do it in yours? I'm not here just to tell you a nice story. I'm here to remind you of a truth that maybe time, pain, or disappointment have tried to erase inside you. God still works miracles. And He hasn't forgotten you. Now answer me, are you willing to trust, even when you don't understand? Are you willing to keep praying, believing, and declaring, even when everything seems stuck? So, if this story spoke to you, tell me in the comments, what miracle are you waiting for? Because I want to pray for you, hug you in spirit, and remind you that, if today you're in the valley, this is not your end. It's just the perfect setting for God to write a story that will surprise even you. And, look, when that miracle comes, because it will come, you'll understand that this whole process only served to bring you to a level of faith you never imagined living.